Hello, psychology students, Mrs. Olson here. This video lesson is titled Carl Jung and Alfred Adler and is part of a series of video lessons on personality theory. So the learning target reads that you will be able to understand psychologists' theories related to personality formation. Now, before we get into this last video, make sure that you have a piece of paper and writing utensil handy or a word processing document open so that you can record your notes on this section. Okay, here we go with the first slide. So the first person that we will be learning about and their theories is Carl Jung. So Carl Jung is how you pronounce that last name. And then I've also given you a face to associate with his name. So a little bit about him. He is considered a psychoanalyst. He falls into the Freudian school of thought. He believed that we are shaped by our future, and he also comes up with phrases or terms called the collective unconscious, archetypes, introversion, and extraversion. And we're going to be talking about all of these today. Okay? Now, opposed to Freud, or if you compare him to Freud, he had a more positive view, believing people try to develop their potential, and they also handle their urges. So remember that when we were talking about Freud, we were talking about these instinctual energies, often related to sexual energies, and so sometimes the id comes out and makes us do things that might be embarrassing or they might not be so great for us. Well, Carl Jung's ideas is that we handle these urges better than Freud described. Okay? So, going into the collective unconscious, the definition of that term is it's part of our mind that contains inherited instincts, urges, and memories that are common to all people. So think of it, I like to think of the collective unconscious as a universal story. So no matter where you were born, no matter what language you speak, where you live, even the time period that you were born into, we all have these similar human stories, these universal stories. So these universal stories are stories that also have universal characters. So there are many stories about a person who is enticed by evil. Okay, so obviously this is the story that we know of as Snow White, but if I present it in the way of having goodness against evil, this is a collective or a universal story that transcends time and different groups of people. Okay? Now, across borders, across languages, across time periods, there's a Cinderella story everywhere. And one of the characters that you often see as part of the collective unconscious is the hero. There is a hero story in every culture in the world. Okay? So within those collective stories or those universal stories are archetypes. It says universal ideas that reflect common experiences of humanity. So really what that's talking about is that universal character. For example, the hero is an archetype, okay? So let's think about our heroes. There might be different kinds of heroes, but in Disney, they're all heroes all the same, right? Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz is considered an archetype because she is an innocent young girl who's trying to find herself. And then we have the Star Wars movies that are very rooted in that universal story and those archetypes. So here is this character. Anybody know who he is? Represents not the hero, but the wise old man archetype. Okay, so Carl Jung also comes up with introversion and extraversion. You might have heard somebody label another as an introvert or an extrovert. Now, intros or introverts, they preferred their internal world of thoughts, feelings, and dreams, while extroverts prefer the external world of things, people, and activities. Extroverts would rather be around people, groups of people, and doing things, whereas introverts are very okay by themselves, reading a book, being alone with their thoughts. And it isn't necessarily that they hate people, but they do prefer their alone time. Okay? So, So here is a graphic to help you understand the differences between an introvert and an extrovert. And I think it might be a good idea for you to pause and maybe look at all the different pieces that are in this graphic. I'm going to go to the next one and give you just a text sort of graphic that shows the differences between an introvert and an extrovert. Enjoy spending time alone versus they gain energy in social situations. An introvert often thinks before they say something or do something, while an extrovert just does that thing or says that thing. An introvert can seem more reserved, whereas an extrovert you might consider or label as outgoing. And an introvert prefers working by themselves, whereas an extrovert would rather work in a team. Okay, so I have these two graphics that kind of are fun graphics, positive ones that talk about, that give you an idea about how an introvert might think. So on this left side, it is titled The Introvert's Heart, and on the right side is another graphic that talks about the advantages of being an introvert. And for the sake of the time of the video, again, I think it's a good idea to pause here so that you can look at all the different pieces to both of the graphics. Okay, now these two graphics represent the extrovert's brain and then things that extroverts like to do at work. Okay, so once again, pause here so that you can look at all the different pieces to both of these images. And we are going to go to the next slide and learn about Alfred Adler. So we're going away from Jung and talking about what Adler came up with. You also want to know that Adler is considered a Freudian. But instead of this idea of sexual energies, he believes that the driving force in people's lives is a desire to overcome their feelings of inferiority. So being inferior or feeling inferior means that you don't think that you are good at something. And so we go through these periods in our lives where we are constantly trying to do better. Make us better at something. Okay, so this is Adler to give you a face with the name. All right, so with the inferiority complex, the definition is a pattern of avoiding feelings of inadequacy rather than trying to overcome them. So it is the person that constantly blames their inability to perform, whatever that is. So there's a blame there. There's an excuse there. They don't do anything to try to overcome that part of them or that skill set that is inadequate. They just make excuses from it or they try to avoid it. Okay? Adler believed that humans are motivated by social urges and that each person is a special being with a unique personality. I think that's kind of a nice one to end on regarding Adler. Now, with the inferiority complex, I've got a couple of graphics that represent his ideas in a few different ways. Okay? It says he can't come to terms with being the smaller cat. So here we have two house cats, and one of them has decided to put himself on stilts to be the bigger cat. Now, sometimes there are jokes made about the inferiority complex. Some of them are sexual. Some of them are related to, say, a man's stature or size. So there are thoughts about why Napoleon conquered Europe, and the joke with the thought is that Napoleon tried to conquer all of Europe because he was a small man. He was trying to overcome his inadequacies of being a bigger man, a strong man, a taller man, and so that's why he had to take over Europe. All right. Executive apartments at the inferiority complex. They're really not that nice. You probably won't like them. The other complexes are loads better. Call now or don't bother. So they're not even trying to sell themselves, even though they need people to rent them. So once again, they're not trying to overcome their problems. They're just not dealing with their problem. Okay? And here we're going to end on this one where you have elk or deer, call it whatever you want. They have these rather large racks on their head instead of horns. This one does not, but he's driving a very nice convertible. And these guys are making fun of him by saying, "Can you say compensating?" All right, everyone, that ends the information on Jung and Adler. Please let me know if you have questions. Bye.